Today we're going to be talking about braiding sweetgrass. This is the second in our series. We're looking at tending sweetgrass today. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that we are grateful for Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island for offering sponsorship of some of the programming. These Something to Talk About programs here at the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. Fieldstone Rolling Bay is where you'll find them on Manitou Park Road. And their phone number is 206-594-1010. Schedule an appointment to take a tour of their assisted living, memory care, and independent living. Also learn about day stay and respite programs. And we'd like to, as a matter of course, acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Puget Sound Coast Salish people, specifically the Suquamish tribe, the people of the clear salt water. We are grateful for their hospitality and their stewardship of these lands and waters since time immemorial. Helping us with this conversation is Anne Lovejoy, who helps coordinate our idea programming. And Anne, thank you very much. If you would unmute, we'll get started.
I'm very grateful to be here, and I'm so glad we're doing this, taking this book slowly, because to me, this is not a quick read. And I really love the fact that we're going to take our time and read a section at a time. Actually, I have to confess that I personally wanted to read it one essay at a time, but it would have taken most of the year, and I got voted down. But I feel like this book is so rich and so dense with amazing ideas and observations that we really could take it that slowly and it would not be a waste of time at all. But in the meantime, we're going to do section by section. And this second section, I thought tending sweetgrass is particularly poignant because it's that caretaking that so many of us are doing at this stage of life or have done recently. And taking care, tending to, and how much time that takes. And I think the major themes are taking time and paying attention. To me, those are the ones that really stood out. And thinking about the things in our lives that we rush through and use shortcuts for and don't take time with. And then, I have to admit, when I read the chapter, which I've read several times, about clearing that overgrown pond, and I thought, oh my God, that took years. I don't think I would do anything. I don't think I have the strength of character to be that dedicated to anything. And my son said, Mom, you've been gardening like a maniac for my entire life. I was like, oh yeah. But if you love doing it, it doesn't feel like work, really, does it? It's interesting. It's something that we're dedicated to and that we're enmeshed in. It's not work. It's something in our life that's really important. And I feel like that theme comes through in these essays as well. I wanted to offer just a couple guidelines before we jump right in. Some of the ideas and topics might feel uncomfortable for some of us, and to make sure we're offering a safe space where all opinions may be voiced, let's all observe these a couple of guidelines. Listen to learn. We ask that readers approach each session with curiosity and willingness to explore new or unfamiliar ideas. If you don't agree with something, it might be helpful to ask for clarification, asking the speaker to explain something a little more fully rather than maybe jumping in to challenge it. Sharing the air means keep your comments to 1 or 2 minutes to allow time for everybody to participate. It's true, the more voices, the richer the conversation. So if you've already spoken once, maybe hold your comments until everybody's had a chance to say something. Allowing some silence is something that makes a lot of people pretty uncomfortable. But if we allow a few quiet moments, it gives people time to develop their ideas and comments without feeling rushed. And also let's give a few measures after someone finishes speaking to make sure they're really finished. I shared last time, and it happened to me again this week, that sometimes when people are talking to me and they say something and I don't respond immediately, I'll hear, didn't you hear what I said? Oh. And I think, I really want to practice this little silences, letting a little silence develop between the things we say so that we can really hear each other and we can hear ourselves. Also, just one last thing is like no repeats. If you've made your point, just maybe let it be that one time, and you, if there's disagreement, know that you may not find agreement, but you will be heard. That we can offer. So
If you want to make your point again, you can watch the video recording and just listen to it again. Now,
there you go.
I want to clarify for people who might be joining us on delayed video that you are in the room with some of the participants, and then there are some people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, who have joined us but are not on camera, but may pop up. So you've got a few in-person guests because we're doing this hybrid, making it easy if you want to show up in person, or if you want to show up virtually, you can show up online.
Good point. And also, just to clarify, it's not a panel. We don't have any expert speakers here. We just have opinionated people like myself and me who want to share our ideas. But I did want to sort of start it off by saying, asking those of you who've read it, and you don't have to have read the book, you're just as welcome whether you're listening to see if you want to read it or just getting started with the idea. But I'd like to know, if you did read it, what stood out for you in this section, in this tending sweetgrass section? Barbara? Unmute.
Sorry. Reciprocity, respect, and gratitude were the biggest themes that came through for me. And there were a couple of chapters that I just thought were so powerful. The one about all of her work in the pond and valuing all life forms. I mean, she's trying to clear all this muck out, and she's thinking about, well, what about single-celled organisms? And, you know, what about the bird nest in the tree? Here I am going to town, but this is a mother too, and she's trying to create a safe habitat for her babies. And I thought that was a really helpful illustration of that sort of reciprocity and thinking of others. And then the last chapter, the allegiance to gratitude, I had never even heard of that. And contrasting our Pledge of Allegiance to the, was it the gratitude?
Thanksgiving statement or Thanksgiving. She said not a prayer.
Right. I just thought that was phenomenal, both in terms of helping people feel connected and finding common ground really easily about all the things for which we can be grateful.
Yes, and if we have interest, I would be happy to just read a flavor of that at some point, that Thanksgiving section, because it's so powerful. Anyone else have a comment they'd like to share, something that struck them? Yeah, if you could unmute, Anne, thanks.
The part that I found really powerful was about the witch hazel, and at the very almost last sentence, at the end of that part, it says how their friendship was medicine for each other, meaning the older woman and the author. And I think that sometimes we forget that the power of the friendship of women for each other. We are very, very powerful alone and really together. And there are so many things that women have in common, no matter if you're in Europe or you're in Africa or you're here or wherever you are. There are common things that women have, things that women have in common, that always will have, always have had. And it's an unbreakable bond a lot of times. And so to me, that is really, really an important theme.
The other thing that you just said there about the friendship being a medicine, that we have a sort of a narrow Western view of what's medicine and what's not. Or being able to walk the hills before going to work, form of medicine. The time spent probably cleaning or reverting the pond in an effort to make it a swimming pond and not a future meadow. Probably medicine for her as well.
And I don't know if you noticed that when she was talking to her older neighbor, who is not a tribal person at all, the older neighbor identified the hazel as medicine. What good medicine for me this bush has been, and used that term very freely. And I thought, that's something I think we tend to associate with tribal lore. But in fact, lots of people have recognized the good medicine in plant relationships, plant and human relationships. Another bond, Rita, right?
Mhm.
Martha?
Aloe vera comes to mind. I know one of my daughters has that plant and just uses it, for stuff when she needs it. But I was looking on page 107 about this Thanksgiving address. Here, the school week begins and ends, not with the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, maybe they say it once a week. And then the different classes are in charge of it. I thought that was very fascinating. But I remember as a kid doing the Pledge of Allegiance every day in school at the beginning. You probably do too, don't you?
Yes, indeed.
I was struck in that section how she talked about when tribal people, elders were meeting with local politicians and business people to talk about big issues, for instance, the pollution of their sacred lake, how all the lawyers would start looking at their wrists, checking their watches, fidgeting, rolling their eyes as this litany of gratitude went on and on. And she wanted to say, oh, what a pity you have so many things to be grateful for, that you have to sit here and wait all through the gratitudes. Isn't that funny? But, it's an interesting reflection on the pace of modern life, isn't it? Read. Say anything? I need to read.
Is somebody speaking?
No, I just turned my thing on.
Oh, hi, Joan. Yes.
I'm sorry. No, I agree with you totally. I love the fact that pledging allegiance and this woman thing, it's very powerful. I'm off. Goodbye.
She's not off. She's just silence. And Joan, you're far from off, just so you know. Yes, it is interesting because the Pledge of Allegiance is a statement of sort of fealty to a flag, and this Thanksgiving address is more of a recognition of how rich a world we are in, rather than promising ourself, really, although there are some comments in here that sort of suggest our responsibility. It's more of an acknowledgement that would bring forth a compassionate response rather than a pledge to do something that may or may not be comfortable.
I think the gratitude address is really an invitation and not an injunction, right? You're not being ordered to do something, really, but it's like that we are one, repeated over and over. We are of one mind. I thought, when was the last time you were in a meeting where everyone sat quietly and thought about something they were grateful for and said, we are all of one mind? I love that idea. I think it would be a lot of meetings very different. Even family discussions.
Do you think that when we often look at things in meeting settings or get-together settings, we're starting by trying to figure out what are our differences? And the Thanksgiving address says, let's start with our agreements. Before we talk about anything else, let's talk about what we can all agree on. What we can say and then agree that now our minds are one. This was the section, and maybe it was because, given that it was talking about the very somewhat controversial topic of the Pledge of Allegiance, it seemed it stuck with me the longest, probably this last chapter in this section, because of course we've had a lot of discussions in this country about the flag and what's allowed and not allowed, and what we should do to people who don't respect it, and that kind of thing. And the story in this section starts off with her saying that her daughter was notified, or she was notified by her teacher that her daughter started to sit out the Pledge of Allegiance, which seems to me like something that is sort of almost a rite of critical thinking growing up, is to say, what am I pledging for? I remember Steve Martin, the stand-up comic, used to have a routine that was about I think it was called the Free Thinkers Pledge. And he would lead the audience in this long pledge. I will do this, I will do that. And it ended with, I will not repeat other things people say.
I liked where she said, that every school child recites this for years until they come of age and decide they aren't going to anymore. Which is the coming of age of maturity, perhaps, right? Deciding what we're going to pledge ourselves to or not pledge ourselves to. But to me, the big piece of that really is the tending, like being aware of all the plant people and the water people and the flying creatures and all the whole thing, and recognizing that they have responsibility to the earth and that we all have responsibility back to them. That reciprocity is part of the tending theme to me. And that's something that I think has been really ignored for a very long time by many cultures, not just ours.
Yeah, I'm gonna just give you a sample of this. For example, we give thanks to the stars who are spread across the sky like jewelry. We see them at night, helping the moon to light the darkness and bringing dew to the gardens and growing things. When we travel at night, they guide us home. With our minds gathered as one, we send greetings and thanks to all the stars. Now our minds are one. We gather our minds to greet and thank the enlightened teachers who have come to help throughout the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, they remind us of the way we were instructed to live as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these caring teachers. Now our minds are one. And that's just a couple of many, many verses.
Another piece I loved in that was when the elder talked about, now at the end, when he finishes, he says, let's put all our gratitudes in this great blanket and take the corners and shake it and cast these wonderful gratitudes up like confetti to go out into the universe to everything. I love that. Like, what a beautiful image. If you tried that with the flag, you'd probably get arrested.
I had a question. How do the stars cause dew to come in the morning?
It probably relates to a story.
Yeah, is that a factual question or a metaphorical question? I would say that when we see the stars, the dew point drops.
Okay.
One thing I would notice a great deal in this section too was how many times the writer said, I want to be a good mother, and talked about feeding and caring, and especially feeding, though, lots and lots and lots about making food, singing while she was canning, making soup for the neighbors, and packing the school lunches over and over and over, and how if the kid took a lunch to school and didn't say thank you, she felt a little bit bereft. But a hug and a thank you, Mama, left her feeling completely satisfied. But over and over, I want to be a good mother. And that tending of everything really is part of, I think, the mothering theme. That if we looked at our relationship to the natural world as a mothering one, a nurturing one, how different things would be. Go ahead, Rita.
Barbara's got her hand up.
Oh, Barbara.
So this dovetails on what you were just saying, Anne, when at the very end of that chapter, A Mother's Work, she talks about the works, a book by Paula Gunn Allen, Grandmothers of the Light, and the changing role of women as we, move through our lives. And then at the end, she talks about older women, and that our strength says turn now to a circle wider than our own children, to the well-being of the community. The net stretches larger and larger. The circle bends around again, and grandmothers walk the way of the teacher, becoming models for younger women to follow. And in the fullness of age, Alan reminds us, our work is not yet done. The spiral widens farther and farther, so that the sphere of a wise woman is beyond herself, beyond her family, beyond the human community, embracing the planet, mothering the earth. I just thought that was lovely and very powerful.
It reminds us that we still have agency and we still have a role to play.
Right, and the other thing is, when you're talking about this good mother, and it's like, when you do something and the kids don't say thank you or whatever. But I think sometimes, for me, I still know what I want to do to be a good mother, and I'm going to do that, whether I get thanks or not. And so I think that sometimes learning, because as we do get older, we have maybe not people around us so much as kids that don't say thank you, but we know what we are doing is good. And so we need to be able to take that on for ourselves, I think, and just do it because we know it's the right thing to do.
I think that if we see somebody doing something, we can help by thanking them ourselves, by stepping in and saying, I see what you did there.
And the reciprocity, I think I had the idea that part of it was she was kind of making a little analogy, like when nature pours out bounty on us and we don't say thank you, maybe nature feels a little snubbed, right? The natural world is off balance because without that reciprocity, she talks about all the time, all through this book, right? If we're not giving back. And you think about so many ways that she talks about, when the strawberries bore the fruit, they'd give something back, right? They'd feed the plants. That always the tending and the caring and the response and the gratitude. And that it wasn't just, you should thank me because I did something nice for you, but that gratitude is supposed to be a natural flowing response to abundance.
And didn't you like when they use the semblance of the shape of a strawberry as being a heart? Remember the first part of it, it started out that way. That was
Yes.
so beautiful. That was really touching.
Mm-hmm. And it's the leader fruit, right? The strawberry is the leader of the fruit because it's the first one. And then it's shaped in heart, right? Yes. That's very sweet.
Martha?
You guys were too. And then we forced our children into writing some thank you notes. And now occasionally I'll have a grandchild who will text me, thank you for. So yeah, it's interesting. And then as far as gratitude, I can't remember if I said this last time. I've read quite a bit about gratitude, and nowadays, if I feel I don't know if I said this last time, if I feel kind of down, I say, okay, 20 gratitudes. It's kind of like an assignment, and just start. And it's amazing. It just pulls you out, just, wow, this happened. I got to sign up for the ukulele class, and I called Reed and told him, Reed, it's on the letter today. He said, I didn't even look down at the bottom. I said, yes, Reed, it's there. I mean, Rex. See, I told Rex, I said, sign up now, you know, and a few other things happened today that were just wonderful. And the more it's truly true. The more gratitude you have for anything, for everything, the more good things happen. So yeah.
Thank you, Martha.
Whatever we focus on increases. I thought that was a really interesting look at things. And if you focus on positive, you'll have more. Negative, you'll have more.
I'm a little overwhelmed. Wait. It's my problem how you're being so silent. I'm very overwhelmed by it. And it means a lot too. I just got the book at the very end of this last week, so I haven't read a lot of it, but just what I'm hearing and so forth. It's very, very meaningful to my life.
Anne or Susan or Anita, do either any of you want to say anything?
I haven't gotten too far reading this. I read it some years ago, but it got me to get out my own little piece of braided sweetgrass. I thought you might enjoy seeing. It was given to me by, you can see it's singed on the end. It's a smudge stick. It was given to me by a woman who's Montana Cheyenne, and the occasion was having accepted a job that I absolutely should not have been doing. I lasted 6 months in it. It was a museum curatorial job in a museum that had human remains, Native American remains, and so on. She was a friend of a friend. Her name was Anne Strangeowl Rabin, and a mutual friend got us together. And when Anne heard where I was, she said I had to come home with her, and she used this as she smudged it and kind of blew the smoke around me as kind of a cleansing, because she said I was sick because I was in a building that had these. It was just before the Repatriation Act, just as that was coming along, and they were just starting to get rid of it. But anyway, she said to take it home, use it in my house, use it in my car, and I would start feeling better. And I did, and I got the confidence to leave that job, and I went into a far, far better situation that turned my life around. I just thought I would like to share that when I saw the book. And she gave this to me. She said to just take it, you know, use it at home. And actually, I never saw her again. But talk about a gift with no expectations or anything. I think giving, she obviously expected nothing back, which I think is really important. So anyway, there it is. Real, genuine braided sweetgrass, used as a smudge, carried with me now for 25 years. And it's a little treasure that I keep, but I hadn't looked at it for a long time. So I appreciate the nudge, and have started reading. So thank you.
Thank you. Anita, did you want to say something?
I just have a couple of tidbits to share. I too, since Susan was showing her sweetgrass, let's see if I can get, can you see? These are my earrings that are, oopsie, I can't quite get them in focus, but maybe I can.
By your face, yeah.
Aha. Anyway, they're just braided sweetgrass, which is fun to wear. And they're made by a woman, an artist in South Carolina. The other little tidbit I was going to share, when you were all talking about the Pledge of Allegiance, my children went to Montessori, so they didn't have Pledge of Allegiance, but after, in first or second grade, my son went to a camp in the summer for a week or two. And the first day he came home from school or from the camp, and I said, "How was it, Griffin?" And he said, "Well, it was okay, but you know, it was really strange. We had to say a prayer to the flag." So he had never, that was his first experience with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Wow.
Anyway, so those are just my two little tidbits. I'm busy packing here, so it's fun to listen to you all and join you. Thank you.
Kids say the darndest things.
How about you, Anne?
Yeah, so I've been very busy. My sister's been visiting me. And so I actually this morning I went, oh my God, I didn't read my book. And so I started reading the second section. I got about halfway through. But I think the thing that really struck me is the dedication uh, of her dedication to her children and and the broader dedication of nurturing the land, her home, her community, and how much energy. And I'm not a mother, so how much energy she has towards nurturing those children. And oh my goodness, it just goes on and on. And I think the pond is, and the ducks, and tolerating these, um, maybe not so comfortable or easy things. That she just her dedication was really made me think again of my own mother and my sisters who are mothers and what they do. That is astonishing sometimes to me.
Thank you, Anne. That duck part was kind of fun because she doesn't make nature seem like a Disney cartoon, a Disney princess thing. It's like the ducks pooping on the freezing on the deck and that whole piece I thought was really fun because she's very realistic and grounded, and yet she still can't bring herself to send the ducks to another, to get turned into cat food or whatever. And that struggle that we all have, I think, sometimes between wanting to do the right thing, wanting to be natural, wanting to respect natural cycles, and finding them incredibly inconvenient and messy. And, how do you balance all that out, right?
Anne,
Yes.
I was just thinking about the Blackfeet, how devoted they are with sagegrass and how they do their ceremonies. Have you ever seen a powwow, an actual powwow, a real one on their territory? It is absolutely out of this world. And I've gone to many of them up at Browning and down at where's the other place? the Cheyennes are down at Crow Agency down at Billings, and it's just awesome. It makes you want to be a Native American, which I am. I have a little bit in me, and I love it. Anyway, I'm off again. Goodbye.
Thank you. I remember being a teenager and visiting my cousins in Montana. We went to a powwow and it was a real one, as you say, not a tourist thing. And I was fascinated because I realized, like I grew up in Concord, Massachusetts, and our idea of a cultural event was a reenactment of the battle at the old North Bridge, right? Which, as very colonialist cultural event, right? With no mention of like the people that we had taken the land from or anything like that. And seeing what seemed to me, to my young eyes, to be more of an intact culture than it might have actually been, it was really impressive. And I thought, I was envious a bit that there was something that really bound people together in that way that I didn't find in my own life at all. The unity of music and dance, and maybe there was that gratitude piece there too.
Right on, Anne. Right on.
Is there anything else that you found yourself thinking about later, like going back to, or?
Well, I am so grateful for the sense of humor that pervades this. We haven't talked about Maple Sugar Moon, the first section here, but she is merciless in self-describing sitting out under the stars trying to keep the fires going to boil down the maple. And also, I mean, this is another thing that is so, it's not something we're very good at doing. She's so easy to make fun of herself. She said, well, then I figured out that if I just froze the syrup at night, I could just scoop off the ice and it would by itself. I didn't have to maybe get that case of bronchitis.
That was clever.
And then realizing she had rediscovered a tribal technique, right? But that, when people who didn't have metal pans, it took some doing, but the freezing and getting rid of the water, because the water, of course, is lighter and rises up, and you can remove the ice every morning, and using those shallow troughs to put the sap in, it's like a very sustainable way to reduce, because it takes 40 gallons of sap to make a gallon of syrup. So that's a lot of gathering, right? And I thought, it took her a while to come back to what turned out to be a very efficient way to take care of, to reduce that sap, right? Make that syrup. I also love the squirrel stories, right? Watching the squirrels up there chewing on the stems and drinking the sap in the hungry times she talked about.
Haven't a lot of cultures done that with salt? When there are salt beds, they just let it evaporate and then they can pick up the salt. That's a pretty normal thing. Oh, I wanted to announce that Barbara Lawrence is going to talk on the creation story of the Suquamish Sunday afternoon at Bethany Lutheran Church this Sunday. So I was really surprised to see that in the bulletin.
Thank you. Yeah, she's got wonderful stories. All right, Barbara.
What time on Sunday?
I don't know. It's after church. I'll hunt around and find and I'll be able to tell you. Okay,
thanks.
We also have a video of Barbara Lawrence telling that story that's archived on our YouTube website, which you can find by clicking the little carrot shape on our website up in the top right-hand corner, the little triangle, and that will take you to the YouTube channel. And if you put in Barbara Lawrence, I think that would pull up, wouldn't it, Reed? He may not be.
I'm tuned in. I don't know the answer and I don't want to say one way or the other. But I'll share how you can find our videos by sharing my screen. And the carrot you're talking about is up here. It's a little YouTube carrot. And that takes you to our YouTube channel. And then you could search down here for there's a video. There's another one. Honoring our ancestral neighbors. Land acknowledgements, Suquamish History Museum origins, Suquamish seasons. So you'll find some in there.
Thank you. I know a lot of people have asked me how to get to that. I think we're going to put something in the splash to make sure everybody knows how to navigate that.
No, the other thing about the maple syrup was the idea that it used to be here's a story, not the sort of where the dew and the stars collect. That the maple syrup used to be concentrated back in the day, and people could just roll up to the maple tree and have some syrup, and so they just laid around and didn't do anything. They were sleepy and lazy, and so the original ancestor made sure that we were respectful and grateful for this wonderful gift, and so it got diluted to make us do some work to get it.
Which basically says that human nature has not changed in many, many thousands of years, right? We have to work at things or we don't value what we get so easily. And yet, you know, part of what I get from this book too, over and over, is the amazing value there is in just like walking around looking at the world. Like right now, there's the most amazing time if you walk through the woods, you'll notice as the leaves fall off, they're being pushed by the bud that's underneath it, that's next year's leaf or stem, right? And people don't even see those buds because they're not looking for them. But really, that's part of this whole amazing cycle, right? And that if we are watching and paying attention, there's so much to be grateful for. I find when I have a harder time in the dark of the year, going outside makes so much difference. To be in whatever light there is and really be noticing the birds and the falling leaves and the beautiful colors and the silence of the woods or the happy chittering of the squirrels or whatever it is, it takes us out of our homes, out of our mental whirl, and takes us into that natural world. And I thought about how the author talks a lot about her morning ritual of just being quiet in nature, going up to the hill and standing there watching the morning be born. That taking that time again, that's a lot of it, isn't it? Paying attention and taking time. Two things we find really difficult.
When she dropped her daughter off at school, she had thought ahead and put her kayak on top of her car. And so she made sure that before she went straight home, she went out in nature and paddled across a lily pad packed pond and just observed, like you were saying about those buds. And she looked at how the lily pads were connected to their roots going way down, and just observed what was going on. And that was a salve for her soul as she was doing the very hard work of saying goodbye for a while to her daughter who was going to school.
You know, I have a question on rhododendrons. They're fairly new to me up here because I'm new up here. I was surprised that the buds for next year show almost right when the flowers come off. You know, and I looked at those like, I think it was in June, and I'm just going, June or July maybe, and I'm going, how can you be a bud now and stick all around for all these months that are coming up until they bloom again? Is that right?
Yes, and you know, we often can get confused about the cycle of plants, maybe because a lot of us are mostly used to growing annuals, vegetables and things like that have a pretty quick lifespan. But you know, for a Douglas fir to ripen its cone takes about 18 months. Right? And there's so many plants that, like an evergreen, will shed its leaves all right, but it takes 3 to 5 years. Each leaf lasts 3 to 5 years, or each leaflet. So their cycle is different, and we don't always recognize that. And it's something, you know, you have to kind of hang out in the woods or hang out in some part of nature in the meadows and fields to start to understand how the different cycles work. But yeah, this part of the world, you'll see a lot of plants operating a little differently than they do in much colder climates or much, much hotter climates, like the deserts where everything blooms like crazy in that brief week after the rain, right? They have to pack all their living into this really condensed time period. Whereas in milder climates like this one, things can take their time and be a lot slower, right?
Yeah, I've got 2 big leaf maples right above my car, and they just give me everything that, you know, comes down. But they're the ones for the for getting syrup. So.
Well, they can be. You can tap a big leaf maple. It takes more than 40 gallons of sap from maple trees that aren't sugar maples. And big leaf maples have some sap, but they're not particularly productive. Plus, they're pretty stressed out. These last few years of drought have been very hard on them. And you can notice when you drive around that you can see the white powdery mildew on the leaves. Last year was really bad. This year there's still some. So you don't necessarily want to ask a very stressed plant to give extra, right? But the trees that are the maple sugar trees are a different species that are more common back east and up into Canada, along the northern tier of the United States more. And here we have a number of maple species, but they're not really sugar maples as such.
But
The other
somebody-
thing that she notices there is that when they're tapping their sugar maples, they don't want to put too many taps in them. They want to
Right?
be respectful of the fact the plant and the roots are going to need that sugar.
And yet they are tapping and they see all the old tap marks. So that tree had been sustainably harvested, the sap had been sustainably harvested probably for like 100 years or more, right? And yet it didn't rob the trees. They know how much, people who have been doing it a long time know how much they can take without hurting the tree. And she said she'd read that by measuring the trunk, you know, you can tap up to put in up to 6 taps, and they put in 3 because they wanted to be more careful. But yeah, you know, carefully taken, we can share a lot from plants that without killing them.
We don't necessarily need the bolt decision to figure out how to fish.
Right?
On the internet is Neil's Big Leaf Maple Syrup, Washington.
You can do it, Martha. It just takes an awful lot more. And like I said, it's pretty stressful for the tree,
Okay.
these trees, because they're not really sugar maples. But it can be done. It's often a little muddy. It's not as clean as you'll find it's got a different color and it's got a little earthy flavor to it. That's a little different.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I know my daughter, they went to Canada and they brought back some syrup, but I don't know if it was from East Coast or West Coast. A little, souvenir syrup. Now this says Washington tapped West Coast big leaf maple syrup. Buy now.
So I'm wondering, we've got a few more minutes. Does anybody have anything they'd like us to think about?
Barbara,
Barbara.
has her hand up.
Yeah, this is at the very end of the Maple Sugar Moon chapter. And she's talking about standing in front of her farmhouse and looking at it, and the trees that were planted on, either side when the homesteaders settled there. And she said, I am living today in the shady future they imagined, drinking sap from trees planted with their wedding vows. They could not have imagined me many generations later, and yet I live in the gift of their care. I really like that idea about living in the gift of care. And that stuck with me as something to think about as I make decisions in my life.
Yeah, I think that one of the wonderful things about this book is that it is, we cannot go back to before the colonists and the European invaders came, and we cannot undo what's been done, but we can all try to plant for the future, to change the way that we look at the world around us. And she's obviously, as our author, bestride a couple of worlds. She's a professor at a university teaching. She's also a mother. She's also has a native history as well as being native. And she's putting all those things together into a new concoction of caring. And we can try to do the same.
I think I've said before, this is one of the books I often turn to when I'm having a hard time, because it's hopeful and thoughtful and truthful in such a beautiful way, and her language is so beautiful. But over and over, you come to her loving relationship with the natural world, which to me is like the most healing, wholesome relationship there can be, right? And I just think, even taking it as slowly as we are, we could do it slower still. And I do hope everybody will keep on reading. You don't have to keep up with the pace we're setting at all. You don't even have to have read the book. But I think if we can really let ourselves sink into it a little bit and think about things she says, think about the caring, the tending, the nurturing, the gratitude, I go back to that beautiful image of throwing all our gratitudes in a blanket and everybody taking a corner and tossing the gratitudes up like living confetti, how beautiful that is. And like, what does that feel like? Does that feel like the way I live most days? Actually, no. But how great, what a beautiful thing to aspire to, right?
Yes, and
Jerry,
her description there of getting the kids ready for school, it's like it's all of us all the time. Bustle, bustle, bustle. And when we can break that cycle for just a little bit, it pays dividends. I interrupted somebody in the room there.
I think of all the things that I've read just this first section. And when I listen to everyone and then I listen to the words that she has spoken in the book, I think of do no harm is what comes to my mind, just to do no harm. And whether even every day you speak to somebody or you think about something, it's like do no harm. And that's kind of grounding to me.
Martha, you'll need to unmute.
October 9th is Indigenous Day. It used to be Columbus Day. And we'll be meeting after that. So it'll be interesting to see what's going on in our community.
well, on Monday, October 2nd, I'm going to do a program about how we respectfully observe Indigenous Peoples Day. The burden to do that is really on us as non-Indigenous people. Rather than asking some Indigenous person to come and tell us how to do it, we can figure it out ourselves. And one of the ways, of course, is joining this book group, or even if you don't join the group, reading the book, drawing life lessons from it. But I'm going to give a whole list of ideas of things you can do, from TV series to different kinds of books to visiting the Suquamish Museum or the wonderful library at the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe has that actually won't be open again until January, but we're thinking maybe a field trip to there would be a really interesting thing to do. So there's lots of ways by educating ourselves that we can open our eyes to the gifts that the Indigenous communities have given to us and invited us into. That's one of the things I'm really struck by with a lot of the tribal events or programs I've been involved with are all so incredibly hospitable, especially when you consider that they often don't necessarily have a whole lot of reason to be hospitable except their own ethic, right? Like, to people who have not been very respectful, they are still respectful regardless. To people who have not been very hospitable, they are hospitable regardless. And that generosity, I think, is part of this, of what the Braiding Sweetgrass book calls out quite a bit too. But yeah, if we're going, because we will be closed on Indigenous Peoples Day as it's now a national holiday, we thought if we put this program together the week before, people can review it and pick a few things to do and dig in.
And we will get together with this group as it's configured, or as it will be, on October 16th. We'll be talking about picking sweetgrass, the next section in the book. And there are copies of the book at the library, and there are still a couple copies here at the Senior Community Center, and they are at discount at Eagle Harbor Books, as this is the Bainbridge Island Reads book for this time. Any final thoughts today?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, everyone here today, and I look forward to seeing you a little further down the Sweetgrass path. Thank you, Anne, for helping to put together the discussion questions.
Well, thanks for letting me get away with it.